Hi, good afternoon everyone. Today we have Mr. Dr. Ajay Bhushan Pandey with us, who is the CEO of UIDAI. Earlier he was the DG of the Aadhar mission. He's also the chairman of the GST at the moment and part of the Sri Krishna Committee on Data Protection. So I think that's pretty wide ambit for questions that we can ask you. So the format is that you give the opening remarks, then I'll ask you a few questions, then it's open to the floor.
Okay.
So opening remarks from you.
So first of all, I'm very thankful for for Indian Express to have organized this idea exchange. So I look forward to very good discussions here. Thank you.
So since you already started with the Data Protection Committee, so let me ask you a question which combines both the committee and your role as the chief of UIDAI. So the white paper of the committee had mentioned the potentially setting up of a data regulator in the country. Do you think Aadhar and UIDAI can come under such a data regulator, or will it be independent of that?
You see, in our country we have multiple regulators, right? And UIDAI is also one of the regulators, because UIDAI also regulates, because there are a lot of players in the ecosystem. For example, the people who are doing the Aadhar enrollment, or people who are actually doing the Aadhar authentication, right? So the UIDAI is supposed to regulate them, right? So, and that regulation will happen under the Aadhar Act, right? But what happens is that there are certain areas which are outside the ambit of Aadhar Act. So therefore, I don't see any kind of somebody coming under this or above that. Each regulator will have its own role, right? And each regulator will have to work under the provision of the respective laws that gets framed for that regulator.
So does that mean that Aadhar will not come under a steward regulator once it's established?
Yes, because see let me also explain another example. For example, RBI. Now RBI is the regulator for all financial data, right? So the RBI will continue to do the job what it is supposed to be doing under the Banking Regulation Act. But whatever are the areas which are not covered by the RBI's regulation, right? RBI's Act, Banking Regulation Act, will come under the Data Protection Act. That is number one. Similarly, whatever the areas which are not covered under the Aadhar Act will of course come under the the new Data Protection Act, right? So in respect of those items, whatever are the rulings of that Data Protection Authority will apply to UIDAI or RBI or any other regulator.
So let me come to the point which has kept you away from Express for such a long time, which is Aadhar and what the case that was happening. So one of the main arguments against Aadhar is that it can be potentially used for surveillance. What is your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on that?
Fortunately, we have a very strong Aadhar Act in our country. And this Aadhar Act, if I say, it rules out the possibility of surveillance through Aadhar in our country. Now, some of the provisions, if you see, and if you compare that with any other provisions in the contemporary laws, you will find that Aadhar has much higher level of safeguards so far as the protecting the privacy and avoid the possibility of surveillance so far as the Aadhar Act is concerned. Typically, if you see in some other laws, if let us say it could be a telephone tapping or something, there even as per the judgment of Supreme Court in 90s when Justice Kuldeep Singh was the Supreme Court judge, so he gave a judgment where he said that for tapping of telephone there are certain regulatory mechanism has to be there, right? The State Home Secretary or the Government of India's certain officers, they could do this. What has happened in case of an Aadhar is that this level has been raised to the level of Cabinet Secretary, and there is a committee which is chaired by Cabinet Secretary, Secretary Law and Secretary IT. only they can permit usage of Aadhaar or the biometric in case of a national security. The usage of Aadhaar or biometrics is completely out of bounds, even for the courts, for example. Now, it was reported, and we faced that problem, that in one case, Central Bureau of Investigation wanted the biometrics of residents of a certain state to figure out that who has committed a crime, right. So, CBI, not only CBI sent us a legal order to us, but CBI also got subsequently the order from a magistrate first, which we challenged. Then CBI also got order from a Bombay High Court, and we challenged that order of the High Court, and we went to the Supreme Court and got an stay, because that time Aadhaar Act was not there. So, even though when the Aadhaar Act was not there, we were very clear from the very beginning that all these biometrics and all this information which we are holding, they are not UIDAI's data, they are actually the data of people, and we are only a custodian or trustee of that data, and we cannot use it for any other purpose than the purpose which we have told them. Just few months back, we got an order from Madras High Court, and it was a case where former Chief Minister Jayalalitha's fingerprint was asked from us, right? You give a fingerprint of Jayalalitha, right? And we politely told the court that under the Aadhaar Act, I am not permitted to give this biometrics to anyone, right? And so that is the level of protection that has been built into the Aadhaar Act. Now, question arises that what happens supposing somebody misuses it? Because you can have a provision in the law and say that you can't do this. What happens if supposing somebody misuses it? Now, any unauthorized disclosure of biometrics or some information from the UIDAI side is a serious criminal offence and punishable with 3 years imprisonment. And no one has been given exemption. For example, if my own employees, and even if we do it, we also become subject to that, the criminal procedure.
UIDAI had signed contracts with some states to produce SRTH, and then some states are using the Aadhaar data, and now they are using it for 360-degree profiling. And they call it SRTH plus. They are using the mirror data of Aadhaar. So now the profiling is happening. Surveillance is not just about the biometrics of a person; it's also about continuously knowing where the person is and what the person is accessing. That's also surveillance in a way, right? So what is UIDAI doing about this SRDH and SRDH plus?
So first of all, we should understand that this profiling, we have to say that, look, if you are going to give benefit to somebody, like a state government wants to give somebody, supposing somebody has to be given a scholarship. Now the state government needs to know from that person, whether that person is, first of all, identity, that that person does indeed exist. It's not a ghost, number one. Number two is that the person comes from meets the criteria of income, if there is an income, right? Or if the person meets some other criteria, right? Now, if that information is being collected from the various sources, this information will have to be collected. That information can be collected again through the Aadhaar number itself, right? So if you have to get all this information from the various sources, so that is not profiling, that is checking the eligibility. So as long as Aadhaar is being used for that purpose, that is fine. But supposing if, let us say, if this information is used to get the political preferences, get some information about the caste or the religion, and try to do all these things, then it is a matter which is very, very serious, and that time I am sure that everyone is subject to law, and he will have to face the law.
So you mentioned about profiling and the previous incidents about Aadhaar numbers being published online but them not being a danger to Aadhaar security as such, but zooming out and looking at all these incidents and also looking at the January incident that happened where a reporter was able to acquire personally sensitive information using Aadhaar credentials. Would you say that there is also a possibility, and also what kind of safeguards do you think are necessary to prevent such kind of, because there is also possibility of profiling by commercial entities, non-state entities?
In fact, that is the purpose. Why the personal information, again, not coming to the Aadhaar specific, all your personal information should not be published. The reason is that one can be profiled on the basis of your mobile number, for example, because people use maybe 1 or 2 mobile number, and everywhere your mobile number is published. One will be able to profile this, right? Similarly, even some other details. So the whole idea is that when we are talking about the personal data protection and also the Aadhaar number protection, the whole idea is that it should not be put out in the public domain, and it should not be put out in the public domain by everyone, so that somebody makes a Google search and says that let me put this mobile number, and then through the mobile number all data from the various sources comes, and that is also some kind of a profiling happens. So we don't want to allow that to happen, right? And that is why, that was the purpose why we gave this personal sensitive information status to Aadhaar number, so that we recognize that yes, this is a unique number and it should not be put out in a public domain so easily, but at the same time it should be usable. It should not be a secret number, because otherwise how else do I establish my identity? And therefore the entities which are using Aadhaar number, they have to be very, they should be sensitive enough and responsible enough not to publish this. And if they publish this, then of course, if we find that intentionally they are doing it, right, then we will take action against them.
So the entire Aadhaar thing, the way it's coming out with the sealing of data, etc., seems to be the opposite of the RTI Act. The RTI was meant to make authorities questionable. Aadhaar seems to function on the principle that everybody has something to hide. So with Aadhaar, we'll get to your secrets, whether it's these fleets of cars or the land you own. So how do you address that basic problem, that this massive sealing of data in one place, which could be a huge disaster, is happening on the fundamental principle that all citizens are hiding something, which we should get to the bottom of?
First of all, let me clear the impression that Aadhaar, all kinds of data are being collected at one place, right? The Aadhaar system was designed on the basis of, minimal data and optimal ignorance, and also the federated databases. And let me just explain to you in a few minutes that when we actually do Aadhaar enrollment, and I'm pretty sure that all of you must, most of you would have undergone this Aadhaar enrollment, you must have noticed that we didn't ask for the father's name or mother's name. Father's or mother's name we don't ask mandatorily, only the name, address, gender, date of birth, photograph, 10 fingerprint iris. No caste, no religion, no income, none of these things. If you compare that with any other information, let's say, when you apply for a mobile phone SIM card, just see the amount of information that we have to give, right? Let's say you go to a bank, or many of you may have gone to the telecom for getting your SIM card, getting a SIM card. So there, even you give your Aadhaar number and put your fingerprint. What we get from the telecom agency is only your Aadhaar number and the fingerprint. And we tell them the answer either yes and no, or we tell you, we send them a copy of your Aadhaar card, electronic, which has again a very minimal information, your Aadhaar name, gender, date of birth, and so and so. This is the information we get. So this is what we call optimal ignorance, that we don't know that what SIM card and what number you got from the telecom companies. We don't get to know that that using that SIM card with whom you are talking, and your all the details which are now available with Truecallers. We don't get that information.
Sir, on 25th May, Europe is going to have GDPR, the Global Data Protection Rules, which basically envisage 4% penalty on revenue if there is a data breach. Do you support such kind of regulation in India?
See,
and what is your view on GDPR?
See, many of such issues have been discussed in the Justice Sri Krishna's committee. And what we feel is that if any law that is brought in, it has to come with a deterrence, right? Otherwise, you make a law and then the law doesn't get followed. So, and it has to be a very effective deterrence. And that is what we will attempt at in our recommendation.
Do you support GDPR?
No, see, the GDPR is one of our inputs. Just like, when we in the Justice Sri Krishna's committee, we studied the various data protection laws. We went up countries after countries, right? Okay, what is the situation in US? What is the situation in Europe? And what is the systems in several other parts of the country? And what is something which, we should adopt in our country, right? So, simply saying, because, the GDPR has many things which are not applicable here, right? And maybe, we would like to do it differently. So, I think we will need to await the recommendation of Justice Sri Krishna's.
So, on the issue of authentication failures now, you also, like when you were sharing your data in the Supreme Court, it was mentioned, how what set your state that point for your own authentication. So now the argument is that it has led to a lot of exclusion at the ground level. So what do you have to say about that?
You see, if you read Aadhar Act, there is one section which is very, very critical, that is the section 7. And this is the section which is used by the central government and the state government to make Aadhar mandatory. And so if you read this section very carefully, it says that central government may require Aadhar authentication for delivery of any benefits or services or subsidies flowing out of Consolidated Fund of India. Because the issue that used to happen is that in past, the number of reports used to come that, look, the benefits used to be cornered away and by the person who is not eligible or person completely non-existent. You have to just give a name and then the benefit is to be taken away. So the central government can make Aadhar mandatory, but as it will happen with any technology, there cannot be any technology which is 100% work, because, and particularly when you have layers of technologies. Similarly, when somebody goes for Aadhar authentication, maybe the device is not working at that time, or maybe there is a power failure. In the areas where there was a scheduled power cut, right? Or telecom failure, or maybe the biometric itself, there is the fingerprint is worn out. So there could be various possibilities. So we were quite alive to that problem. So what we provided in the Aadhar Act itself is that central government may require authentication or furnish the proof of possession of Aadhar number. That when the authentication fails, then he can prove his identity by producing the Aadhar card and going through some other due diligence, and then the benefit can be given. So the law has allowed this, right? But off and on, we do get the complaints that the person person went there and somehow, the person was genuine and his biometric did not work at that time and he was denied, right? So we have communicated to the state governments or the central ministries. Then the Ministry of Food in the month of October 2017 wrote to all state governments saying that authentication failure, one should not be denied. You have an exception register where you record that such person, did try the authentication, it failed at this time, and here is based on the alternate identification, you give the benefit. That exception register should not also be misused, otherwise, everyone will start, and then whole Aadhar system will be completely become non-functional.
So what is the authentication failure rate, over, like on a daily or monthly basis?
Right. So the authentication failure rate, in fact, I presented this information in the Supreme Court also. That authentication failure rate means what? What we found is that so we got 3 categories of our broad users. Like in telecom, the crores of people have done authentication. There the success rate, the fingerprint authentication success rate is 97%. The people also go to the banks to open a bank account or for getting the various banking services. There this fingerprint success rate is around 94-95%. And then there are certain state governments like the PDS, Manrega and other places, their success rate is 89%. So when we were analyzing this data internally, then we figured out why there is a difference. That in the telecom, this success rate, because see, we can't say that the telecom all people are having good biometrics and therefore their success rate is this much, because even the manual laborer also needs a telecom connection, right? Old people also need a telecom connection, right? So the population sample would be the same across the 3 broad areas. So why could there be so much of difference? Then one of the initial the feedback that we got is that in a telecom, the SIM card agent wants to sell his SIM card. So he will properly guide the customer and say, no, you put your fingerprint correctly, because he wants to sell SIM cards. He doesn't want to fail, right? So therefore their success rate is higher. Now in case of a bank also the success rate is very good, because 95%, because the banks also do this. Whereas in all this government scheme which was having a problem of massive leakage and the corruption, there now because Aadhaar is upsetting the the legacy interests, and therefore initial resistance, and therefore our success rate could be little lesser. But we have also seen that over the period of time, the people who want to defeat our this system, they also realize that okay, look, I mean this is something which they can try for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, but eventually they will have to come round, and then they will have to also get into the system.
You made the point that when it comes to information that is seeded with that, let's say a bank account number or bank details or things like that, Aadhaar doesn't actually have any information with it. So you're basically saying that if the government or if somebody wants to find out how many, did Sunil Jain buy a car, they can't find out that data from you because you don't have it. But at the same time, what you've also said is that in case of a national emergency, if the cabinet secretary decides that some data has to be disclosed, it will be disclosed. But on the basis of what you said so far, there is no information that you have to disclose it. So what exactly can you disclose? Should the cabinet secretary tell you that discloses? I mean, do you have the capability of giving somebody's biometric?
Right. So let me clarify that. See, if this under the national security, if they ask us that, can you provide the biometrics of such and such terrorist is there? Can you provide the biometrics? So that could be one use case. Or this Aadhaar number authenticated at how many places, right? But that would be only that information, right? So this is the kind of information which we can provide, but only if a specific order comes from the Cabinet Secretary's committee. So that information. But UIDAI will never have the information that whether a terrorist bought a car, right? So UIDAI will not have that information. So that information, even if that national security clause is invoked, that information, we can't give because we don't have that information, right?
Why is that UIDAI is very intolerant to any kind of criticism? So that, you file FIR against reporters, you file FIR against even opinion writers. Why is it so?
You see, I don't think that we are intolerant, right? We, if there is a violation of law, for example, and if we find that this violation of law is not unintentional, because for filing an FIR, two elements have to be prima facie seen. One is that there is a violation of law, and then there has to be a criminal intent. You know, the intention, because in the law it is called mens rea. When we find that there is a mens rea, and then there is a and also the violation of law, in that case we are duty bound to file the offence. If we don't, then tomorrow we can be hauled up saying that why did you not file this, right?
And also bringing you back to the question of UIDAI taking criticism, is UIDAI open to ethical hackers and independent consultants taking a look at the systems, or is that something?
Now you see, what we are dealing with is this is a national identity system. Right? Now the national identity system has to be handled in a very, very responsible and very, very mature manner, right? And a very, very professional manner, right? Now it has to be done in a manner which does not make you further vulnerable, right? I mean, just imagine a case that you have a system, and let's say supposing somebody says that, all right, come and look at my systems and everything, right? There is a concept called hill climbing, that somebody first get some small bit of information, then in your next interaction he gets another bit of information, and then by doing this he exactly knows that which are your relatively weaker points, and then he knows how to attack you, right? So whenever we have to take such decision as to how much to expose to the outside world, we have to also be aware that we also have a responsibility to keeping the data of 120 crore people safe, right? And we should not do take some steps which later on in a hindsight we come to realize that we should not have done that. So far as so if any outsider or somebody, right, so far as the review mechanism is concerned, we have a very strong multi-layer review mechanism to figure out that whether we have any vulnerability and what we are doing is not correct and so and so. Many things we don't discuss this in the public domain, right? Because many things if we start discussing in the public domain, and particularly with matter regarding to the security, for example.
So the commonest and the most persistent concern has been about the security of the data. Now the Attorney General told the Supreme Court that the data is secured because it is hiding behind a 10-foot high and 4-foot thick wall. And you have a 4-minute video which you offered to show the court, which will prove that it's completely secure. So what is in that video, if you could just kind of tell us?
Let me give the perspective, because what was reported in the media and what was told by the Supreme Court, there is a little bit of difference there. The context was that when the Attorney General was trying to explain, one of the petitioner's point was that the whole data is lying somewhere abroad, right? The data, the UIDAI does not have the full control of the data, right? The data is lying with some private agencies. Many of these private agencies are abroad in some other countries, right? So the Attorney General, he just to give a some kind of a assurance to the court, and he said that, look, here is the our data center, and not only that, it is our own data center, UIDAI's own data center, it is well protected, and this is how so in that sense he said this, right? So but then how it got reported in some section of media was a little different, and that is what you have said just now, right?
So the question is that if there is this fear that people have over how secure the Aadhaar database is when it comes to the biometrics, not personal information and things like that, why don't you just organize, invite people to hack into your system?
About this organizing this hackathon, now only there are many things which we do at our level through the involvement of the various agencies, but only thing is that we can't put that in the public domain, right? So if I ask you the counter question that how do you know that we are not doing it, right. But only thing is that in all such matters, wherever this is a question that it concerns the the very very sensitive data of 120 crore people, right? What we are doing to ensure security, right? If I start disclosing this, it will have some other security implications. So that is always the balance that I have to strike, right? Because supposing if I say that I did this. Normally, in any security exercise that you do to find out your own vulnerability, because supposing if I say that I am doing this exercise, I will have to disclose that this is the agency which did it. What is the result that which was done it? Then the people know okay, this is what the kind of vulnerability will be was existing at a particular time, and from that the people would know that okay, these are the other kinds of vulnerability that could still be there. So that is what. So that is why we have to be very very careful of doing this. But then I always maintain that look, we are very very serious about the security of the data, right? And we take this security of the data, very very seriously, and take all steps which is required, because we are conscious of this, the great amount of responsibility which has been cast on the UIDAI, and say that look, and we can never afford to fail in this. During the last 7 years. It's not that the people wouldn't have tried. Even if, let's say, if I have not made out a challenge, people would have tried, right? But then last 7 years, we have thwarted all kinds of attacks from the, coming from inside the country, from outside the country, and we have been able to keep the data safe. But then the question is that, can I boast and say that no, my data is 100% safe? Being, also a person of a some technology background, no technologist or security expert can say that his data is 100% secure, right? I mean, I can only say that it was secure till the till yesterday, right? But today the security threats, the technologies, they are changing, so we need to constantly keep on upgrading it. And we have to keep on upgrading it and taking all kinds of security measures, so that as we have kept our data secure for the last 7 years, it continues to remain secure even in future.
Well, thank you so much. I think we have put you through enough. The rest of the questions are done.
Thank you.